Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It's the 6th of February. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information, and you can do that easily by giving us a call on the Alaska Weather Information line at 1-800-472-0391. Find us online at weather.gov/Alaska, or if you can't find what you're looking for, feel free to email me anytime. I'll be happy to help you out as best I can. david.snider@noaa.gov is the way to find me. Here's a look at what's going on across your part of Alaska tonight. In southeast, the winds are still an issue, and because of that, because of some of the warmth coming up from the south and some of the cold still draining out from the north, we have a winter weather advisory for the Juneau and Douglas Island area. A little bit of light freezing rain is possible there, as well as some just light rain freezing in general across the region. Probably going to put a little bit of a glaze on some of the roads there. That continues to be an issue. It has been for a good part of the day. The trend should slowly decline and conditions should improve as we get into the overnight hours, but that could take you through the evening drive and then onward into early tomorrow morning. So conditions could still be kind of slick around there as you get started tomorrow. So make sure you're being careful in the Juneau area there for slick driving conditions there, thanks to freezing rain and then some additional light rain falling through the region before that winds down later this evening. Now, a little bit further north, we've got two things going on. One around the White Pass area, that would be the wind chill advisory. It seems pretty persistent with this pattern there. Wind chill values could be as cold as 40 below around the White Pass region. So I'll say it again, if you've got people coming and going up and down through White Pass there on the Klondike Highway, make sure that they've got some extra gear just in case something goes wrong there. They got to pull off to the side and can't keep the car on for a while. It could be fairly cold out there. 40 below is enough to get frostbite in under 30 minutes or less. But the orange color here is actually a watch, and that will be for stronger winds starting up tonight and then continuing possibly through Thursday, the worst of which would be through Wednesday night and into Thursday morning. Gusts there could reach upwards in the 65-mile-an-hour range for the Skagway area. Sustained winds anywhere from 30 to 40. So still a lot of wind right now. More wind expected to come through the region as we head into tomorrow night and then onward into Thursday. So a high wind watch has now been hoisted for the Skagway area. Out west, you can see a winter weather advisory for the Bering Strait region and St. Lawrence Island. Blowing snow is the issue there. 2 inches of snow may actually fall onto the ground, but the blowing snow will probably reduce visibilities. Gusts in the Bering Strait region and St. Lawrence Island could reach upwards of 40 miles per hour. So we'll be continuing to keep an eye on that there with winds working through the region and keeping visibility at poor levels there. So be extra careful out there on St. Lawrence Island and the western end of the Seward Peninsula. Now, as we take a look at the satellite picture, you can see the warmth and moisture spreading northward toward southeast. Of course, all of that is flowing over some pretty severely cold air that is working its way out of continental Canada and into parts of central and northern sections of southeast. That freezing rain again making things slick in Juneau. Out across the west, you can also see a southerly flow working its way into the central and eastern Aleutians. That is really starting to undercut a lot of the cold air that's working in across the west coast and through the Bering Strait there. So warm air is working its way toward the toward Bristol Bay. That could have some implications on some of the newer sea ice there. Most of the ice that you see across the northern Bering Sea, certainly the Chukchi Sea, that's a little bit more substantial at this point in the season. But any new ice that is formed here south of the Kuskokwim Delta bears watching and probably won't do so well here in the next couple days. Low pressure right now sitting across the northern Gulf at 1,004 millibars out west. You can see another low parked across the central Bering. Really, the big feature is still this big wall of cold across northern Alaska and western Canada. Levels there anywhere from about 1,038 millibars, a little bit lower up across the Arctic Ocean. As we get into tonight, you can see a band of snow showers still possible across south central. We still have some of that ongoing across the region tonight. As you move into southeast, you can still see an opportunity for some mixed precipitation. It wants to snow. It just kind of can't get enough cold there at the lower levels to make that happen. Out across the Bering Strait, snow showers continue there all the way down the southwest coast. Low pressure working up around Adak, bringing rain to the central chain. You can say that 5 times fast. 978 millibar low there, and some stronger winds expected across the Alaska Peninsula and through the eastern chain. As we get into Wednesday, that low works into the western Bering at 978 millibars. A front stretching all the way from just south of the Gulf of Anadyr out toward Nikolsky and just west of Unalaska and Dutch Harbor. High pressure moving into the western Gulf The 1,027 millibars, that is pushing some milder air up the west coast, and once again, that's what we'll be watching for to kind of change the ice conditions perhaps around the Bristol Bay region. Snow and blowing snow will continue across the Bering Strait region and into the Chukchi Sea. Pretty cold and stable air continues across the interior for the Beaufort Seacoast. Maybe a little bit of a breeze around the Brooks Range here, and you'll notice some snow popping up across the Alaska Range, probably around eastern parts of Prince William Sound. And once again, that tight pressure gradient you see here, compounded by big cold across the interior and low pressure trying to drain that out through southeast. That's where the winds are going to come through across the White Pass region and for Skagway. So once again, a high wind watch has been posted for your region. Strong winds have been an issue for your area for several days, if not several weeks, it seems like now. But winds will continue for the region as a result of this weather pattern right here. As we get into Thursday, notice we've still got a tight packing of the pressure gradient here across northern parts of southeast, so I wouldn't expect a huge reprieve, but that overall pressure gradient seems to be changing just a little bit, and it could be enough so that conditions improve as we head into Thursday night and Friday. But for right now, I would count on those winds continuing, at least for northern parts of southeast as we go through Thursday. A look out west shows that a more intact frontal boundary is kind of falling apart now. We've got low pressure sitting there at 991 millibars. Rain for a large part of southern Bering Sea communities there, including St. Paul and St. George. Some of the higher terrain of the eastern chain and the southern Alaska Peninsula still looking at rain mixed with snow, or at least some snow showers, and then light snow across the Beaufort Seacoast. Look for high pressure to keep things pretty cleared out for the interior, southwest, and really most of the Gulf of Alaska there as we get toward the end of the week. And that means we're still talking about cold. If we're still talking about high pressure, anywhere from 25 to almost 40 below in some cases around the upper Yukon into the upper Tanana Valley, 24 below around Fairbanks, and as you get into south central, teens and 20s above zero, nearly freezing in Kodiak, 20s and 30s for southeast, mid to upper 30s for the Alaska Peninsula, the Pribilofs, 20s for the Yukon Kuskokwim Delta, 18 for Nome, and about 22 below around Barrow or so. High temperatures, 3 above there tomorrow. As you get into southeast, 30s and 40s there, so mild and getting warmer, which is good for your roads. Teens and 20s for many in the northern interior, south central, 20s to almost 40 in Kodiak, upper 30s to low 40s for the chain and the Alaska Peninsula, 29 for Nunivak Island. Bethel, you're looking at about 32 or so. Look for overnight lows there in the teens and 20s. Nome, about 19. The North Slope, anywhere from 5 below to about 15 below as you head further east. 40 below or so around Fort Yukon. The Middle Tanana Valley and Fairbanks looking at 15 to 30 below. Look for temperatures in the teens for south central, southeast. Look for highs in the 20s and 30s as you get into your Thursday afternoon, and milder in south central.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
On the flying weather now, IFR conditions are expected to be generally limited out toward the Bering Sea from about Kiska and points north and east out to the western end of the eastern Aleutians there around Nikolsky. And then also across southern parts of southeast, you'll see a little bit of IFR to start up your Wednesday morning. Otherwise, widespread MVFR through most of the Panhandle into parts of south central, including the Kenai Peninsula, and across a large part of the Yukon and Kuskokwim Delta regions, Norton Sound, and in through the Bering Strait. By the time we get into Wednesday afternoon, you'll see improvements across southern parts of southeast and around coastal areas of the Gulf. Out across the western Bering, IFR conditions spread from St. Matthew up toward St. Lawrence Island, down through the Pribilofs, and still hovering right over the eastern chain and wrapping around into the northern parts of the Bering, all again around some very low areas of stratus there and probably a little bit of fog. As we get into Thursday, that should improve a little bit, but you'll notice still a quarter of IFR conditions lingering from St. Matthew down through the Pribilofs and then into the southern end of the Alaska Peninsula, as well as the eastern sections of the chain around Akutan, probably Dutch Harbor as well. Improvements out west, considerable improvement for southeastern Alaska and MVFR all the way from Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse just about to Barrow, all the way around the Horn toward Point Hope and Point Lay. Thursday afternoon, MVFR conditions pretty much hover around the Beaufort Seacoast. Widespread VFR continues for the interior and for most of southeast, with patchy areas of MVFR from St. Lawrence Island and the Bering Strait all the way down toward Sand Point and west toward Dutch Harbor and Unalaska, St. Paul and St. George, the central chain, and another wave building out around Shemya as we get into the afternoon on Thursday. Here's your pass conditions in detail. Things look pretty good for Anaktuvik and Adigan Pass as we go through your Wednesday afternoon. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, as we saw, will start out with MVFR conditions, but improvement is expected as we go through the day. Similar conditions expected in Rainy Pass. A trend there from MVFR to VFR conditions are expected. Windy Pass, we expect to see visual flight rule throughout the day. Isabel Pass also looking pretty good. Mentasta, VFR throughout your day. Tonita Pass, expecting a little more MVFR in the morning, but also looking for improvement. Portage Pass will start at marginal levels there. Most of that, again, will be the Prince William Sound side. VFR conditions expected. And then Chilkoot and White Pass also looking for improvement with even better conditions as we get into Thursday. For your morning freezing levels, look for levels above 2,000 feet for St. Paul and St. George, and down around Dutch Harbor on Alaska to Akitan, about 4,000 feet or so. Southeast lingering from about 2,000 to 4,000 foot to about 6,000 feet on the southern side of the Dixon entrance and Haida Gwaii. You can see even warmer weather poised down to the south. Most of the interior, of course, will be and remain below freezing. Icing potential is limited to generally isolated moderate conditions above 4,000 feet for the Bering Strait out through the central chain and the Pribilovs there. Out across southeast, still dealing with the leftover low that's hovering out here across the eastern Gulf. That's around 4,000 feet and above right now for the best icing potential there. That, too, is listed at isolated moderate. Let's take a look at the jet stream now. For the daytime tomorrow, we're still under the effects of a building ridge across the Bering Sea. With that, 50 to 60 knot winds coming in pretty much from the south. You can see the main quarter of the jet stream hovering across the North Pacific, that ranging from anywhere 90 to 165 knots. As this streak crosses the Pacific, though, we'll likely see some additional buildup of storm activity here, as those fast increases there in jet speed tend to stir up low-level disturbances closer to the surface, and that's when we start to get some storm activity. So we'll keep an eye on that. This is also probably going to push that ridge eastward with time, so watch for that southerly flow later on in the week to shift a little bit more into the Gulf, and this ridge may kind of reorient itself a little bit more across more of mainland Alaska. In the meantime, the really cold air located up north, we're under kind of a stable area of no man's land weather there across the interior as high pressure sits across the north and eastern Pacific. At 9,000 feet, low pressures across the northern Gulf. We've got a south and westerly flow, 20 to 30 knots. Here's our weak ridge now. This seems to be breaking down with a stronger southerly flow working its way across the west coast, 20 to 70 knots at 700 millibars at 9,000 feet, and more of a westerly flow building on the south side of the chain with strong southerlies across the Bering. At 3,000 feet, you can see a slightly stronger flow across the Pribilovs, across the eastern chain, 60 to 70 knots in some cases. An easterly continental flow continues at this level out of Canada and into south central, 10 to about 20 knots in some cases, and north and easterly winds, giving up to more of a southerly flow across the Brooks Range. Southerlies there across the west coast as well. So turbulence, we're going to watch for some strong winds around the Lynn Canal into Stevens Passage and generally Haines Skagway to Gustavus, Juneau, and southward there, thanks to that strong outflow gradient we have set up there. That's below 4,000 feet, and watch for some considerable moderate across the west coast and the chain tomorrow.
When you think of a national park, you probably envision wide open natural spaces, undisturbed by human activity. There are indeed such places, but even in some of the most remote areas of a place like Kenai Fjords National Park in Alaska, the mark of man is present. Marine debris is a menace to the farthest reaches of our globe, and even designated national park lands are not immune. In the summer of 2009, the Resurrection Bay Conservation Alliance, a grassroots conservation organization based in Seward, Alaska, decided to do something about the marine debris fouling the beaches of Kenai Fjords National Park. Marine debris coordinator Tim Johnson had first-hand experience with the issue.
The summer before, my wife and I, Michelle, had done a paddle from Seward, sea kayak paddle from Seward to Homer. Really, our eyes were open to some areas that we didn't realize there was so much accumulation. It was very deceiving up front. You couldn't really get a feel for the extent and impact of it. You've got this nice high tide line that's quite pristine, and you really don't get a picture for the impact and the amount of debris in that area until you get behind those storm berms. You get back into the lagoons and the vegetation around those lagoons. And then you see the absolute extent back into that veg and how intertwined and enmeshed these decades of trash deposition. So we were just appalled by that and said we got to get something together on a larger scale.
The Resurrection Bay Conservation Alliance is a local nonprofit community organization, and they have been instrumental in helping the Park Service obtain funding to get larger boats to help move the debris, and they get volunteer labor and organize the work trips. And so it's really a partnership between the Park Service and the community to help get out and really get a project done that in and of itself any one group couldn't do on their own.
Most of that trash was baggable. However, there were large items, huge, piles of hauser line, for example, that we just had to hoist up onto the boat.
The volunteers didn't just bag, haul, and hoist the garbage, but also carefully recorded what types of debris were collected.
In many ways, the debris itself is a resource. Archaeologists use middens, the trash heaps, as a way of analyzing past cultures. And in one sense, marine debris is a form of a midden. It's a trash heap that left for the future would be something that people could use to analyze our culture. It may not say the best things about our culture or everything that we want, but we need to be able to document what we've done so that we can preserve that legacy, make sure that we as a society don't forget what we've been doing.
We had two larger categories of marine debris that we picked up. Commercial fishing means like, say, gill nets, large hauser lines, anything that would be associated with more of a commercial fishing scale. And then the second category was more recreational fishing and household, which would be general plastics, things like that. So we had about a 75% of the commercial fishing marine debris element, and about 25% of the recreational and household further out the bay. And we had the exact opposite the closer we got to Seward. Within the bay, it was about 25% commercial fishing versus 75% recreational fishing and household.
The trash is not just unsightly for park visitors, but also poses threats to wildlife and marine habitat.
Really one of the larger issues now that you go to this plastic that can really get into the food web and affect the food web differently than something like glass.
These substances, for instance, all these polystyrene blocks that are breaking down into all these little crumbly bits are further breaking down on a microscopic level, and how much of an impact that has, in this ecosystem is yet to be determined, but I think it's got pretty high potential.
Well known that sea turtles will eat plastic bags floating in the water. They look like jellyfish to a sea turtle, and Obviously, a plastic bag doesn't go well in the digestive system of a turtle. Albatross will see small pieces of plastic floating on the surface and think they're small fish and other food sources and eat that in their stomachs, especially in some of the northwestern Hawaiian Islands. They'll find dead albatross that have starved to death with a full stomach, and it's full of pieces of plastic.
We're affecting our local areas this way, but we need to be thinking about it from more of a state and a global, international scale. And most importantly, to try and focus on prevention of it coming in the first place. Because we're just going to see this continuing, to build up on our beaches unless we're able to get a little bit more of an approach on prevention on the front end.
Marine debris is really a global problem, in all the oceans, and there are many different sources. Global shipping is one. Fishing debris from commercial fishing, recreational boating activity on land, stuff blowing off land, washing down streams, people just throwing stuff on the shore.
Though the problem can seem overwhelming, Johnson remains upbeat about making a positive difference.
No, you gotta start locally. You gotta, take control of what you can do, and make something with that, and try and move on from there.
Overall, more than 9 tons of debris was removed from the beaches of Kenai Fjords National Park and transported back to Seward to be deposited in a landfill.
People gave a lot to the project in order to make it happen. That was awesome. One of the most amazing experiences I've ever had. Being able to put that large of a group of volunteers together, dedicated volunteers to put that much effort and give that much time and pull all the different agencies together to see it all happen was incredible. It was incredible. Yeah, very fulfilling experience.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Time for a quick check of your sea ice edge. You'll notice the pack ice is fairly widespread through the Bering Strait, but there are some areas of marginal ice inside of Norton Sound, north of the Yukon Delta, between Nunivak Island and the coastline itself, and Etoll and Strait. And around St. Lawrence Island, there's areas of generally ice-free or very limited ice coverage there below that 80% threshold and even below 20%. So there are some changing conditions there across the northern Bering. The other thing to keep watch of is any new ice down here across southwestern Alaska where warmer air is coming in on a stiff southerly wind. And there is a very thin area of Aplenia near Shishmaref, not something you'll see on this particular map in any great detail, but if you head to weather.gov/Anchorage/ice and zoom in around Shishmaref, you should be able to see that there. Here's a look at what's going on in southeast. We know the winds are going to be stiff across the northern Lynn Canal. That should continue tonight and really all the way through Thursday. A high wind watch has been posted for Skagway. That'll go through Thursday afternoon for gusts that could reach up to 65 miles per hour in town. But stronger winds will extend further south than that at times. Watch for sustained winds from 25 to 35 knots tomorrow out of the north with 5 to 6 foot seas. Lighter winds through Clarence Strait and across the outer coast anywhere from about 10 to 20 knots. More of an offshore wind the further north you go. And you can see that strengthening as we get into Thursday. 20 to 25 knots in the region with 7 foot seas along the outer coast. 55 knots sustained across the northern Lynn Canal there as we get into Thursday. So once again, some strong winds coming into the region and northerlies extending down into the Clarence Strait and diminishing the further south you go. As you look at Wednesday in south central, generally light winds for most areas. Northwesterlies across the Barrens up to 20 to 25, 4 to 7 foot seas. There are gusts outside of the Hitchinbrook entrance and the Copper River Delta region up to 35 knots with a 7 foot sea on Wednesday. By the time you get into Thursday, a little bit of a northeasterly shift for Prince William Sound, 10 to 15 knots with 2 to 5 foot seas. There are northerlies over the ice in the northern inlet and then 5 foot seas as you head south of Calgon Island. 20 knots expected there with 10 knots in small seas across the north and western Gulf east of the Barren Islands and outside of Resurrection Bay. Across southwest, look for 20 knots inside of Bristol Bay. Easterlies at 20 knots with 3-foot seas, I should say. Southeasterlies across the Alaska Peninsula, 30 to 35 knots with 7 to 15-foot seas on either side. For Kodiak Island, 10 to 15-knot winds, 3-foot seas inside of Shelikof Strait, becoming 6-foot seas on Thursday. Wind strengthening across the Alaska Peninsula as that strong south and southeasterly flow starts to pick up even more. 30 knots expected there with 7 to 15-foot seas developing, 4-foot seas inside of Bristol Bay, and 10-foot seas from Castle Cape to Chignik. Across the Aleutians, our strongest winds will probably be focused across the eastern chain. 35 to 40 knots expected there with gales in most areas, anywhere from 14 to 17-foot seas across the central chain, 21-foot seas those south of Unalaska and Nikolsky. Out west, a little bit more of a south and westerly flow, 25 to 30 knots expected on Wednesday, becoming more southwesterly in uniform on Thursday, 20 to 25 out west. And for the central and southeastern chain, or eastern chain, you should see that east and southeasterly flow diminish just a little bit more, anywhere from about 10 to 12-foot seas across the Bering Sea coast to about 15 to 16-foot seas across the Pacific coast for your Thursday. Across the west coast, southeasterlies still be blowing up over the ice there. You'll notice the ice pack is drawn in a little bit south of Nunivak Island. Remember, we did see some marginal ice in this region. 14 to 17-foot sea for the Pribilofs out towards St. Matthew with a 30 to 40-knot wind in the region. Easterlies across Norton Sound at 15. Those come up to 25 knots as we get into Thursday, and easterlies anywhere from 25 to 35 knots across the west coast. The Pribilofs out toward St. Matthew, where you'll be looking at about 18-foot seas there, 13-foot seas around the Pribilofs on Thursday. As we get into Wednesday across the North Slope, 15 knots blowing offshore from the south and east. Brisk wind advisories for most of the region. Southerlies coming up through the Bering Strait, 25 to 30 knots again over the ice. And once again, there are a few areas here that actually have some marginal ice, so be watchful on that if you are headed out. West and southwesterlies across the Beaufort Sea at 15 to 25 on Thursday, and south and southeasterly winds across the Kotzebue Sound region and north of the Bering Strait and through St. Lawrence Island, anywhere from 30 to 35 on your Thursday. Recapping tonight's weather, watch out for wind across northern parts of southeast. You saw that there in the marine forecast just a minute ago, a high wind watch posted for Skagway. As we head through tonight and into Thursday, the gusts will be strongest Wednesday night and Thursday up to 65 miles per hour in town, and certainly across the Lynn Canal with 55-knot winds sustained on Thursday. A wind chill advisory is posted for the Klondike Highway down to 40 below. There, be extra careful if you're traveling, and a winter weather advisory continues for the Bering Strait region there as snow and blowing snow is expected. Watch for continued snow in that region as we head into Wednesday, and more wind and snow for southeast. Thanks for watching Alaska Weather.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.